Salutations, Wargamers! I am now 7 games deep into Warhammer 40k 10th edition. That's right, I've played far too much 40k over the weekend. Sleep is for the fucking weak. And I wanted to share basically my first impressions. I wanted to call this video First Impressions, but that won't be clickable. So I probably told you something around the brokenness of some elements of the new format, and I want to address that up front. Some things about 10th edition are almost certainly broken, and I'm going to go into them in more detail over the course of the video, but I think that's okay initially. I do think that's fine because I don't think they spend or have enough people testing this game. I mean, they make a lot of fucking money, right? They could employ more testers in-house, I mean. Not sending it out to people to leak out to everybody, but they haven't, and I've come to terms with that. And as long as they patch the game regularly through the Ministerium Points Manual and an FAQ, I'm okay with that. As long as they keep those free, easy to find, updated with version numbers, so we can all be on the same page of where we're at. I think the game should evolve and grow and be patched. I don't think we should have things rigidly set in stone for physical releases, because that's how some casuals feel it would be better. I actually do believe having a game that functions and isn't fucked from some unforeseen game-breaking balance issue, I think that's good. I think unfucking the game is good. So I played 7 games. Hang on, is it 6? Blood Angels, Demons, Custodes, Orcs, and Space Marine Car Park. 7 games. I've played them all on TTS, which has its own unique differences and problems, like measuring 3D to the top of the building and over it with fly is difficult. More on that in a second. I've played a little bit of a wide range of the armies that I like. I still have things I haven't played yet. I want to play Sisters. I want to play with Necrons. I'm looking at stuff on my shelves. Thousand Suns, I haven't played with Magnus yet. Death Card, I'm going to give it a go. Everyone's telling me they're terrible. And so far, overwhelmingly, I've enjoyed myself. Even in the games I've lost, barring one, which is the first one I'm going to address. My first foray into 10th edition was playing Blood Angels into Eldar, and it's clear to say that D-Cannons are a problem, and the Wraith Knight is a problem. For those of you that don't know the Wraith Knight and the D-Cannons are an indirect weapon source that has devastating wounds, as is the Knight. And devastating wounds is the thing I'm going to talk about in general. It's a problem. The Knight has towering, which is also a problem. Both of these mechanics have a lot of issues. So devastating wounds is basically if you roll a 6 to wound, your damage becomes mortal wounds bypassing the save. Basically similar to some of the strats in the last edition, like the bolt guns that Sisters had and there's fucking loads of them that turn your damage into mortal wounds to bypass saves, which is very good at killing things with good saves, like Terminators, for example. So that's kind of one of the intentions, but the other thing that I don't know if it's intended is that it spills over. So a lot of devastating wounds units are 1 or 2 damage. You see a lot of it. Demonettes in the Demon's Codex, for example, are devastating wounds with 1 damage. So if they roll a 6 on the wound, they bypass your save and do a mortal instead. Meanwhile, the Wraith Knight cannons are D3 shots, strength 20, AP 4, pretty good, 2d6 damage. Yeah, that means that if you devastating wound onto a squad of 10, let's say 10 Imperial Guardsmen, and you roll 2 dice, you get 8 wounds, or even 10 wounds. Instead of that shot hitting 1 guardsman and incinerating like it would do with another high strength shot like a las cannon, the devastating wounds, if you roll a 6 on the wound, will then melt the entire squad because the mortal wounds spill over. The overspill means that these guns are not only good into good save heavy vehicles, in this case the strength 20 gun, like a Lehman Russ, which has a 2-up save, to kill a Lehman Russ battle tank, but it also nukes infantry. And in the case of the game we played, the Wraith Knight had 2 of these cannons, that's 2d3 shots, strength 20, AP 4, 4d6 damage. It melted a squad of 520 points of Sanguinary Guard and Dante. Just wiped them off the table in 1 shot. Yeah. The problem with devastating wounds isn't just that the guns are good against everything, both infantry and vehicles, but in the case of specifically Eldar, D-Cannons are also similar to this. D-Cannons are also some d6 damage and have the devastating wound thing, but the Eldar have strands dice, where they've also dice at the end of the game and have access for the rest of the game, and they can adjust them and play with them in certain ways. So they will have 6s to wound just available to them if they have 6s in their strands pile, so they can proc devastating wounds. Also in this case, my opponent, 8 from the Discord, shout out my friend, he just rolled 6s to wound and then thought, okay, well I got a bit lucky there, I'm going to stick 6s and 5s into the wounds dice, the damage dice, sorry, to just melt my Sanguinary Guard. And on top of all that, the Wraith Knight is 320 points, so it's too cheap. And on top of all that, it's towering, which means it can just do true line of sight even through obscuring terrain. So I ended up just deploying my Sanguinary Guard on the line, hoping I got turn 1 to advance and charge them, because I was playing the Gladius detachment. But I didn't, and they all died. So I took a gamble, but there was no point in trying to hide them in the terrain, so because we didn't have enough terrain to hide everything. Not everything could be hidden. So, unpacking that. Devastating Wounds is good against everything. Devastating Wounds is incredibly brutal with Eldar. A towering unit that can do it can ignore obscuring terrain and see you behind a building if you aren't like line of sight, like fully line of sight blocked. What else? Oh, and the Wraith Knight costs too little. The Wraith Knight's got a whole strew of issues. However, the towering also affects knights. All the knights are towering as well, so they can see over buildings. And they can be seen too, so in some circumstances on turn 1, a Space Marine car park, as I'm calling it, playing 7 or 8 tanks, will just wipe the big knights off the board with oath moments, especially playing Gullum with 2 oaths. Or you lose the die roll and lose all your tanks because you can't hide them on most terrain. Do you see the problem? Towering is a mistake. You shouldn't be able to see which line of sight. Obscuring terrain helps 9th edition to work, and it should be in 10th edition fully as well, but instead of this weird towering thing. Towering tends to only be on the knights, it seems. Greater Demons don't have it. I don't think Magnus has it either. So it's good that those things can be protected from being shot, but the game is... It's less killy, but guns are pretty good now. So that leads me to my next thing. Let's talk about Overwatch and stratagems and the interaction. What I've found so far is that the game is far more interactive than it used to be, because stratagems work at points where there's more interaction points. So for example, Overwatch now, it can be triggered in your opponent's move phase. So that's when they start to move or end the move, or at the beginning of a charge move. There are 3 points where you can Overwatch now. And what this means is that as something runs towards cover, you can unload a tank into them to try and like wipe some models or kill the whole unit before they get into cover. And that feels really fun and interactive. The problem comes is that guns seem to be just a bit better than most melee options, and I've played 2 games playing Demons with a Bloodthirster and Be'lakor. The guns being able to just randomly shoot you 24 inches away when you're trying to run for cover is a bit rough. Shout out to Draven on my Discord, who suggested perhaps Overwatch should happen at the end of move, so if you move into cover, behind a wall, you either get the cover or you block line of sight, meaning that moving into terrain has a benefit. If you can shoot at the beginning of the move, then there's no interaction there. You can of course decide to remain stationary, which means you can't fire the Overwatch strat. And there's some really interesting built-in stuff here. There's one strat for 1 CP to deep strike in your opponent's move phase. You have to drop in on their turn. And that might sound weird, but it allows you to drop in and then Overwatch on a unit that's charging in the charge phase. You can body block things. You can do all these kind of cute and tricksy stuff that makes the game feel a lot more interactive. I really, really like that. Also, it's all worded that if you drop in their movement phase, you can't Overwatch in your own movement. So a deep striking with rapid ingress or strategic ingress, or whatever it's called, is actually strategically better against Overwatch. So there's definitely some thought and some things that seem like they're very intended there. But overall, Overwatch is a bit too good, simply because guns on some of these things are fucking stupid. There needs to be a change there, but I don't know exactly what or how much of a change, or it might just be that some units with the ridiculous guns might need to go up in points. And that brings me to the next point of like, when I've been playing guns, I felt a lot more powerful than my melee stuff. And there's a few reasons for that. Firstly, a lot of movement has been decreased in this edition. For example, the Wraith Knight only moves 10, I'm pretty sure it used to move 12. Be'lakor, his fly, the fly keyword has changed. You have to fly up to the top of a building and down again. You don't fly just over it. So you don't ignore the verticality of terrain in movements. So Be'lakor has to go around buildings, for example, as will Magnus and Mortarium. Bloodthirster's a lot of change. So moving around stuff is a lot slower. Ghazghkull Thraka, for example, used to be a monster, and buildings were his arch nemesis for this very reason. They've given him the infantry keyword so he can just go through a building, but they've reduced his movement from 8 to 5, which is actually quite a big change because he's such a big base that sometimes Gaz will go through a building, and if he gets his advance roll or whatever, and you don't get through the wall that he can breach and move through as if it's not there, then you can't end halfway in the wall. So now you're stuck back and losing movement. So him being reduced to movement 5 or whatever it is from what he used to be is actually quite a big downside for Ghazghkull Thraka, and I find that frustrating. Beyond that, the charge phase has been changed in a way that, so it used to be you'd charge something and get like up to 12 inches of movement, and you'd pile in 3, you would consolidate 3, you do a lot of stuff where you just end up moving like fucking 18 inches in the charging combat step compared to your 4-inch move on your base of your model in the normal move phase. It made no sense. So in order to do that, they're now asking that when you complete a charge, you must, if able to, finish your move in base-to-base contact. Now this leads to all sorts of issues where it doesn't work like it used to, so it's a new learning factor. But like, so it's now making you base, so you can't like move tangentially, like at a tangent to the model you're going into and then wrap around them. You have to go into them and touch them, but then you can body block some of your own models, but then should you be moving those models to touch it? It kind of feels very weird in how I'm meant to resolve this, which on TTS is a pain, and a physical I think is going to be more of a pain, because I don't watch my opponents finish all their charge moves with like a hawk, and I think some people, both purposely and not on purpose, are going to scum people by not doing this properly and getting loads of extra movement where I won't be, because I'll be trying to play by the rules. It feels really finicky. It feels very hands-on in a way that's not good because it makes it difficult to resolve and more thought-intensive than it needs to be. And there's an element of that across the edition. With the Overwatch strat being at the beginning and end of move, in theory you should ask, I'm now going to move this, is that okay? I'm now going to move this, is that okay? I'm now going to move this, is that okay? Because if you move a model and move another model, and your opponent's like, oh, hang on, sorry, I want to Overwatch. You get into these weird discussions of, well, I've moved a second model now, you know where I was moving to, so it might be advantageous to Overwatch the first model, and you're like, oh, but you didn't give me an opportunity to Overwatch. It's just a fucking mess, because there's more points at which you have to stop and talk to your opponent to make sure they haven't got a response before you move on. It's not game breaking, but it's a lot more time consuming in a way if you want to play by the rules to give everyone all the right options. A lot of melee combats that I've seen have just been absolute slapfest, which is fine. I actually quite like the idea that melees go on for more than one turn. It used to be you charge, you murder blend something or bounce off, and they were your two options. You murder blend or bounce off and get stuck. Now things seem to be a lot more scrappy, even with some of the big creatures and stuff, like Gaz and Abaddon both absolutely fucking melee, but even like the Bloodthirster, I think I took the wrong profile, to be honest. He needed 2 damage sweep, but he was like not just chewing through things like he used to be. He's been fixed since last edition. And Bellicor is way less deadly as well now. Doesn't ignore invuns. There's none of that in the entire game, which I think is good. However, Devastating Wounds is the equivalent of that. To see where I'm going again, Devastating Wounds needs to be reworked in some way. I don't know what the fix for Dev Wounds is as well. I've heard a million different options. Capping it, making a set number of wounds, not letting it overspill. I think I prefer that one the most out of all of them. And obviously some point increases on things like Wraithments and D-Cannons. The new stratagem system I really like for the most part, apart from Overwatch being probably too good because guns feel better than melee this edition. I do like all this, like taking captains and similar characters in certain factions, because only some factions have them, they get a free strat that you've already used. You get to like Overwatch twice, for example, so bit of an issue. Or like you can stand your ground twice or pop smoke twice or whatever. Guilliman giving a free strat is very, very strong, it seems. The strat system of having only 6 per codex or 8 per codex to allow you to really understand what's going on is nice and tight and simple. You can explain it all in a short conversation before the game, or you might even know it if you played just one game into that codex, you now know what they can do. And I think the whole stratagem system has been refined to a point that it really does work quite well. Oh, and the mission structure. I love the new mission structure. So you can obviously choose your objectives at the beginning, or you can just randomly draw them from the mission objective deck. And I love that randomization element. It's probably not the most competitive way to play, but the adaptive strategy you have to have is very, very fun. It's very much appeals to me as a person who wants to solve a puzzle that has not got a finite ending, a puzzle that I can sort of use my tools to get towards a scrappy sort of fixed together ending that I need. And on top of that, you can discard secondary objectives at the end of each turn that you haven't completed to get a CP, and I love me some CPs in the strats. CP generation is good this edition too. If you're looking for people that can do strats for free or make CP, I think they are an auto-include in your army. And then the leader mechanic is as good as I thought it would be. Everyone's taking like 6 characters minimum, 7 or 8 in some cases, because they're really, really strong in terms of giving the buffs to the singular units. And there's really cool combos you can do as well. Most armies, Genestead, Cult, and Space Marines definitely have them, for example, have units that shoot and apply a buff. So you shoot an enemy and that enemy loses cover, loses some movement, has more AP against it. So you have a shooting applying buff. Then you have your leader buffs that go onto your unit and give them a buff, +1 to wound, lethal hits, sustained hits, or whatever. And then you also have still some auras here and there. And those are like your 3 types of buff to an extent, and then your strats, I guess, as well. So there's still some synergies and some combos you can build that feel like you're being big brain, and when you pull them off, they feel powerful. Had one of my tanks deleted by a deep striking GSC unit yesterday, for example, and that's still there and that's fun, but I think they have lowered it from your entire army is synergizing. You know, your ancient ultramarine castles or your entire Iron Hands army doing the same thing. That seems to be gone. So overall, so far, I'm really, really liking the edition. There are some wonkiness with points. There are some fucked up keywords, Devastating Wounds and Towering being the 2 that stand out to me. Oh, we still have Lone Operative. Lone Operative is where you can't shoot something that's more than 12 inches away. And this might be something that needs to be fixed too, because there are units in some books, like Tau, for example, or there are even like whole squads in Space Marines that just can't be interacted with the guns from 12 inches away. Bellicor has an aura that gives this for 18 inches, but kind of that army needs it, gives it to everything within 6. So sorry, anything that's at least partially within 6 of Bellicle, because otherwise you get just shot off the board. But Lone Operator does end up feeling a little bit less interactive than everything else in the game, which I find interesting. GSC can just randomly give some units Lone Operative. So you get up, you line your shot up, and suddenly you can't shoot them. Got to declare it elsewhere. Kind of dumb, but it makes snipers good, because they can sit up on the top of a 3rd story building, which gives you an extra AP with plummeting fire, which is pretty cool. And they just can't be shot until you get close. So they don't have to, it used to be with the Vindicator, you have to hide them, walk them out, lose some ballistic skill, fire, miss. Now the Vindicator and the Scout Snipers and similar feel really good, especially with precision, which allows you to pick off characters if you can see them. So now you're like looking for a character and sniping them. And it feels both flavorfully on point, tactically cool. Like, I like all of this. I just think Lone Operator randomly on like Gulliman and Tech Marines get Lone Operator if they're near certain things is kind of stupid. And the last point I'll touch upon is the point system and the army building system, where all war gear is free. I know a lot of people are kind of hating this because they feel that the granularity has disappeared, but I think actually, now that like every book has like 6 or 7 valid characters that all do different buffs to different units, that's where your customization comes in. The fact that I can like napkin math down a army within like 20 minutes, maybe even less, well, it would take me a lot longer with the old stuff with upgrades and war gear selections and stuff like that, I think is really fun, really tight, really clean. I love it. I do think that some extra customization options on a wider scale would be good. So for example, I often find my lists missing 5, 10 or 15 points, and there are upgrades, warlord traits, enhancements as they're called now, that cost points, and there should be more of those, and they should be varying from 5 to 50 to give you that little bit of leeway to fill in the points and get a freebie when you can't hit the 2k cap with your current unit composition. But the armies being just like bring whatever the fuck you want to start the edition is also really fun too, because you can just play these stupid skews, these meme lists and stuff, and just have fun with it. And that's the main thing, is just having fun with it, right? Even if your opponent brings a fucking Wraith Knight and absolutely ruins the game. I'm planning to play some more for certain. We're going to be running a TTS, a Tabletop Simulator League, on my Discord, starting hopefully in the next week or so. I'm very excited for the Forge World books. I'm very excited to get out and play at our local event as well. Let me know what you think of 10th edition. Have you got a chance to play yet? Have you played on Tabletop Simulator? If you haven't, you should give it a go. I honestly think it's great. There's a whole Discord for it, but my Discord supports it too. $2 a month on Patreon. You can get involved with that. But let me know in the comment section below what your first impressions of 10th edition are, and I'll see you in the next one. Ta-ta for now.